Growing your business is tough, but don't worry, we've got you covered. We interview industry experts on how they've solved their most challenging business problems in SaaS or e-commerce. No fluff, just step-by-step playbooks to help you dominate your market and crush the competition. This is the How We Solve podcast. Here's your host.
Welcome to another episode of the How We Solve podcast. And today I have the pleasure of Alex Theuma joining me from SaaStock. He's the founder of SaaStock, which used to be my favorite SaaS conference, real world in-person conference. But due to the current circumstances, this went away and I was really bummed. But Alex and his team actually figured out to create a really, really good online summit event. I was really blown away. I felt like going to an online event, you don't really have the networking aspects and, meeting new people part, which I really enjoy about conferences, but it was all there and was actually really cool. So I'm excited to have Alex on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David. You said SaaStock used to be your favorite SaaS conference. So hopefully it certainly will be. But yeah, understand, obviously, we've been, you said, running conferences in person, predominantly in Dublin we ran 4 conferences in Dublin, consecutive years. And then we expanded that globally. But because of COVID, we've not been able to, I think all the other conference producers in the world to run those events in person. So last year we had to figure out a way to survive, but also to kind of continue adding our value, to our community. And we brought that event online and ran, several conferences last year, and sort of, been finding our way and our feet in an online conference world, which looks like 2021 will be very much still online. But hopefully we'll be back in Dublin in 2022. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Also, what I really loved about your conference is the side events that you had. For example, SaaS Society, which was just amazing from the type of people that you met and the activities that you had. So I'm really looking forward to that you bring this back. But today we'll talk about the online part and how you manage to transfer offline event into an online event that actually is cool, provides value to attendees and to sponsors and etc. So I'm excited to talk about this. So the problem we're solving today is how to run a proper online conference, I guess, right? Cool. So let's jump right into it in terms of which tools and frameworks or services or consultants or books. I mean, there's not that many books about this topic yet, or back then. How did you approach this thing? How do you pull this off?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to the point, around books, I mean, I'm somebody, I learn by doing, but also I learn a lot by reading. Certainly, learn how to be a leader and a CEO and a manager by reading, and that's been super helpful for me over the years to enable SaaStock to, I think, sustain and grow. When it came to pivoting the business, I had actually not read huge amounts. Certainly heard stories at SaaStock conferences of companies like Segment when they pivoted 3 times or whatever at a very early stage. But this was kind of our first pivot that we had to do, because we couldn't do in-person conferences. And we had a list of things, ideas that we kind of looked at initially. What do we do to kind of generate revenue, to generate value to our audience? And what's the fastest time to revenue, fastest time to value? And online conferences seem to be the winner out of our 7, great ideas. So we kind of went with that. But there wasn't really many books around. I don't think any specifically at that time. Virtual conferences, I'm talking about March 2020, virtual conferences at that time and sort of in the preceding years, they'd existed, but they were more like webinars on steroids, right? And you had a couple of people on Zoom or whatever, the technologies were talking, and maybe some people in a chat on the side. But that was kind of pretty much what it was, right? And now we saw that there was technology out there which kind of claimed to replicate almost 100% of what you could do in person at a much lower cost. And and from a business model perspective, it was very interesting, very attractive. And so I was very sort of curious by that. We were just kind of keen to explore it, but nothing to kind of really read about. So it was really just kind of learn by doing, and also getting a bit of advice, from, I think, peers and also the people that were kind of running the technology kind of platforms that we were using.
So what are you using? What did you decide on?
We decided to use Hopin. We decided very quickly. So the team went through or started a process to evaluate event tech platforms, right? I'd come across, so whilst they started that process and getting their spreadsheets sort of ready and listing out here are all the, the platforms that we sort of researched, etc. About 6 months prior to that, so, pre-pandemic, etc., I'd had a VC sort of reach out to me. He said, "Oh, Alex, it's going to welcome your opinion, this, new platform a new technology, etc. What do you think, etc.? Give us your feedback. I just kind of had a look at what it did, and I was just like, well, look, if it can do what it says it can do, I'm quite excited about it, and I think I'd like to kind of use it. And then I shared it with the team back then, and this was in 2019, and then everyone's like, oh, cool. But then we were really busy, and we came into 2020 and focused on in-person events, and so kind of forgotten about it a little bit. But then when it came time for us to actually choose an online tech platform for events, it came straight back to my mind. I was like, what was that platform? Oh, it's called Hopin. Let's have a look at it. And then I kind of had another look at it, and I was like, guys, appreciate that you want to go through this process and evaluate all these different platforms and almost like an RFP sort of process. We don't have time to do that, right? We need to act. Let's go. We're using Hopin, and that's it. And actually being that, I think, sort of decisive and just kind of deciding on that platform really kind of helped us. Were we lucky in a way, because it ended up that Hopin is now the leader in that market? I could have been decisive and chosen a real dud, right? Because it was something, we might have been stuck with it on a 2-year contract or whatever. But luckily, I was introduced to what is now the market leading platform, and Hopin, it's grown to a 2.1 billion valuation in less than 18 months.
I bought the AppSumo deal of Hopin. I was like, yeah, what's this thing? Maybe, yeah, whatever. I'll just buy it. Very happy I did, because
it's incredible. I really love the tech, and I'm really sort of behind it. Obviously, we didn't know how to operate it too much, but it was kind of, again, some of it fairly intuitive. The founder, Johnny Bufferhart, at that time, as you would expect, was leading the sales. So he was our sales guy, and we had a long call with him, with the team, 1 or 2 calls, and that kind of really helps us kind of really understand is this the right kind of platform for us, just kind of solidifying that. And then we went forward with it. No regrets to this day. It's not the only piece of tech that we use for I guess kind of our online conference kind of tech stack. It's almost like an all-in-one. You don't really have to use anything else. But actually, they recommend, so if you want to kind of take it up a notch, right, then we're bringing in, some other elements, because you can't be good at everything.
Do you mind listing them?
For the first event, which was SaaStock Remote back in June of 2020, we had Hopin, but then they recommended that we work with a production company to kind of, really give it that, great look and feel of the SaaStock conferences that we have in person, if you want to elevate it, really kind of promote the brand and kind of stand out. So we work with a production company called Catapult, who are actually our in-person conference production company based out of Ireland. Catapult.com
or?
I think it's catapult.ie. Yeah, so they had pivoted at the same time from doing in-person conference production to now we're doing online, and they were kind of figuring it out, but they'd also been very quick and built out studios and got all the kind of tech stack in place from their side. But what they did for us is, so we had the platform, which was Hopin, but you could also look at that being the venue. So this is the venue that people come to. And then we had a main stage, and then we had some sub stages, in which were really what Hopin sort of terms as sessions. And on the main stage, they suggested that you have this element of production to make the video quality better, and you could bring in things like graphics and so on by basically you port in. We use Zoom, so we had all the speakers on Zoom, and then we ported them in to Hopin through a feed. I don't know if it's like RTMP or something like that feed. And yes, so the speakers weren't actually present in Hopin and couldn't see the attendees, which was a bit of a drawback. And they're just on the Zoom call doing their presentation to no one, but actually there's 3,000 people watching them. So it's quite awkward for the speakers. And we got a lot of feedback with the speakers this is quite strange, because we don't know, we can't get the reactions. Was it good? Was it not good? How did I do? Very kind of common question. But we did that. We used Zoom to kind of port it initially. And then we used Hopin for networking, but it was just randomized networking, and Hopin were even calling it, what's that called? But they were saying chat roulette for business.
But I did it, everybody interacting with was wearing gloves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they said it was a bit like chat roulette for business. You met up with random people, which was kind of really nice initially and serendipitous, and that's what they were trying to sort of replicate. But you couldn't pre-book meetings, with anybody, and it was difficult to search, for certain attendees and so on. So in some respects, it was a little bit limited from the engagement side of things. So that initial tech stack was it was just Hopin, it was Zoom, and we had a production company, and that's kind of how we ran the first event. That's now evolved. We've ended up being able to kind of produce the events on our own. The look and feel is perhaps not as high as it was Catapult and production company, but the cost is much lower. for us, right? So it's better for our gross profit sort of margins as we generate less revenue online events than we do for in-person. And we use a tool called StreamYard to help us then with the production. So instead of using Zoom, we now use StreamYard, which subsequently Hopin has just recently purchased.
Is it a Vidyard product or is it something different?
No, it's StreamYard. Apparently they were doing 35 million ARR. I think they were required for around about 200 million, if I'm correct. And now that's as part of Hopin's, fantastic growth trajectory. Hopin has gone from being a 20 million ARR company to 55 million ARR company, overnight by that acquisition. But StreamYard is this great technology which allows us to do all this production and then it plugs into Hopin and makes that experience sort of really nice. On the networking side, we use a platform called Conversation Starter. And basically, there's definitely pros and cons on that. But everybody that used it loves it. It's an independent platform with no integration into Hopin. And effectively, the users go onto Conversation Starter. Then they can search, there's better kind of filtering in terms of who they should meet. If you're a VC and you want to meet a seed stage company that is in, artificial intelligence or whatever, then you can have these parameters and search for these companies and say, I'm looking to meet this and make these connections. So it's more of a matchmaking tool in that respect. Pre-book meetings, have video calls on Conversation Starter. We paid for that separately. It was a separate platform. What we saw was that we then had 500 people of our 3,000 attendees in SaaStock EMEA concurrently on Conversation Starter.
Which makes a lot of sense. I used to go to a lot of conferences, like a lot. And I rarely watch the talks. I'd rather just meet people, chat with people, or talk with the speaker one-on-one later, to kind of get the gist of things. So on these online conferences, I like to just stay in the networking part, not necessarily being forced to go to the actual talk, which I think is...
Exactly. And we see that people come to the conferences for different reasons, but also networking is always very, very prevalent. What we did see, and maybe after the fact, we were like, okay, well, we had 500 people that almost never came onto the Hopin platform because they were just doing back-to-back meetings for those 2 days. And anyway, since then, Hopin have developed this kind of pre-booking meeting facility within their platform. But still, it's not quite, I would say, sort of perfect to our needs. So for SaaStock Remote coming up, what we've done is we've split the content day separately to the networking day. So we're doing the 24th and 25th of February is the content sessions. So come and learn. And then 3rd and the 4th of March is just networking. And it's pure networking options where both using Conversation Starter and Hopin, and people can come in and just connect with, SaaS founders from across the world.
I'll be there if you want to chat with me. Come. I'm really looking forward to it. Another tool that I just came across yesterday is speakeasy.co, which is kind of like the one-on-one chat thingy where you can, if you have an online event or even just a Zoom event, you can just send people to this URL to this room, and then people can, are being matched, which is, thought for completion's sake. We recently, for our SaaStock membership sort of program, we did a founder investor day last week, and we used Icebreaker for that. And that was a really cool tool as well. And we got really good feedback from that. So that was quite fun. We also used it, we tested it internally before we ran it for the Founder Investor Day. And we found it was a really good, fun way to connect the team sort of remotely. And we will probably sort of roll that out internally to do icebreaker events within the team, once a month or maybe more. We have our town halls where we bring everybody together, and then usually it was just the leadership team, giving a presentation of what's new, and then we have some Q&A at the end. But now we used to do Zoom breakout sessions and kind of just bringing small groups of people together and then have them chat, which is cool. But in the next iteration, we'll use this speakeasy.co thing to just, do the one-on-one conversations for just 3 minutes or so to kind of meet a bunch of people, which is cool for culture in remote companies. So cool. So we have a bunch of cool tools that we've been using. I think it's hopin.to. Then we talk about Speakeasy, about StreamYard, and Conversation Starter. So check out these tools. And I guess the next big step in this, how will this be priced, and how do you provide value to the partners and the attendees, and how did you communicate this? Kind of how do you figure out to which price point you come, and how to just I guess a big thing in terms of having conferences Zoom is you make a lot of money from the sponsors versus from the attendees. Just use a facilitation platform to bring these people together. How did you communicate this, and what was the pricing model?
Yeah, good question, right? And back then, certainly back in March, there was just so little information, to kind of go on from a pricing perspective from a delegates, but also partners as well. Whilst I was kind of joining peer groups, some of that information wasn't quite being shared, at that point. And I was, often you look to the market as well when you're pricing and, how whether they're competitors or not, kind of like pricing their solutions. But again, there was kind of nothing there because everybody just reacted really quickly to say, okay, we need to launch, an event. And there wasn't really kind of anything to benchmark it against. And I was looking at like Web Summit had, announced because they run Collision as well, which is their North American event. Collision announced their event before SaaStock announced that we were doing an online event, but we scheduled our online event just slightly before theirs. And I kept looking for their pricing, but there was no pricing available, both from partnerships and on their website. So I was a little bit blind in one sense, but what I did, again, I was having some conversations with Johnny from Hopin, and because obviously he's got visibility on his customers and, what they're charging. And that helped me get to a kind of price point. He was going to perhaps pushing me a little bit to price kind of higher than, originally we were kind of thinking. But in the end, we agreed, I think, on a price of around 299 euros and then up to like 499 euros for a ticket for SaaStock Remote. I was speaking to, again, some other people that have been running virtual events, for a long time. And they did not believe that we would be able to get people to pay for an online conference because people are just used to free and you're competing against free. And so I remember seeing those emails, and maybe at that time I was a little bit either overconfident or, you've got that founder's kind of pride and saying, well, I know how much my product is worth. I know how much value we're bringing. And I just kind of thought about it. We had 26 people in the company at the time, out of necessity, all working on one thing, which is SaaStock Remote, right? And making it a successful event and working on it for 3-month periods. And I was like, well, I'm not giving that away for free, right? And I can't because we're for profit. So that was one thing, but that's not the only revenue stream. So we were kind of determined that people would pay to attend.
I think it's also a really important thing to just charge for it. Also for the other attendees, because if something's free, you often get a lower quality of attendees. Even happy to go to conferences actually way more expensive, because then it's a natural filter, so you actually meet more high quality people. Sounds wrong, but that's, just from a business point of view, that's.
Exactly. And that's something that we've seen. It's a really good point. So we are still competing against free, right? So whilst we may have lowered our prices a little bit for online, most of our competition, it's free to attend their events. And in most of the market, it's still kind of free. They see what they're looking for is volume rather than quality. And 20,000 people are attending their event, or 50,000 people are attending their event. What they get is 20,000 or 50,000 registering, but maybe 2,000 might attend. Of that 2,000, it's not great quality.
You know what would push me to pay more for a ticket is if you can network with people who paid for the higher tier separately.
It's a good idea. I'm taking that down as a note. It could be possible. On the ticket pricing side, I got a little bit of help from the founder of Hopin, which was helpful. We kind of came up with a price. We had no data, like historical data kind of back on, no market data to cross-check it with. So we just kind of went with our price and what we felt was a fair value. And I think ultimately it was a third cheaper than our in-person pricing, from when we look at it. On the partner side, again, difficult. We couldn't really kind of see anything. But what I was looking at when I was doing the pricing was okay, so, to come to SaaStock in Dublin, when we had 3,000 attendees, the price was, let's say, 30K for a gold package, right? For SaaStock in Dublin for 3,000 attendees, and people work out, what is their kind of cost per lead and, the ROI, etc. And
also you have to get your staff there.
Exactly. So
get your staff there, hotels and blah. So it's not going to be 30, it's going to be 50 at least,
There's 30 for the sponsorship, then they go to the booth, and then they got to get the staff there. So it's quite an expensive cost all in. And then I was thinking, well, look, we're promising, the same amount of attendees. We're promising the same amount of leads. And then from a cost perspective, it's okay, I get it. It's costing us less. So we will pass on the fact that it costs us less to the customer. But we shouldn't go too low because, again, we're kind of delivering the same amount, or we thought certainly, same amount of quality, same amount of leads, same end result. And so we came up with the pricing. Ultimately, we landed on 50% lower than our in-person events, right? And when we went out to the market, initially, and went out to our regular customers, the ones that always sign up with us first, a couple of them fell off their chairs and because they didn't know virtual event. And they were like, you're going to charge 15K for a gold package at SaaStock Remote, like I would have priced it at $2,000 or something like that, you know, and it's like, but it's like, where is he getting that information from, or that, you know, that particular customer? So there was a bit of, you know, initially that sort of like challenge, and also we're in a pandemic and all the marketing budgets were frozen, right? So we're like, okay, we need to sell this event, we need to get sponsorships, but marketing budgets are pretty much frozen globally. And that was a challenge for the sales team. You know, I think there was a little bit of doubt at the time, like in these circumstances, can we sell this? You know, are people buying? Somehow we found a way. And actually what we found was that our existing customers were slower to sign up with us. And what we got new adopters, new customers in, and we got a load of new logos that we'd never had before. ZoomInfo, SurveyMonkey, you know, Front, you know, some examples, right? So Mercato, and you know, now they've turned into, you know, really good customers of ours, and our existing ones were very kind of reluctant, and even some of our very good long-standing partners are still yet to come back and do a virtual event with us, and I don't know if they're waiting for in person to come back, but they'll be waiting for some time.
Maybe we could like highlight some case studies or some wins that these people who attended or sponsored the online events, kind of like, you know, if you can highlight some case studies, maybe this convinces.
Absolutely. So one example from a meeting perspective, we have one partner at SaaStock Remote, which is user.com, and they came with 4 people. I think they were like a startup sponsor at the time. We've actually stopped doing startup sponsorships, which I'll come back to. But they came, and then they decided, look, hey, like instead of like hanging around in our virtual booth, which wasn't getting huge amounts of traffic because they were one of like 70 sponsors, and you know they were down at the bottom of the landing page where the virtual booths are. You know, they went out and they leveraged, you know, the random meeting tool, networking tool, and other kind of like one-to-one sort of meeting tools. And they ended up with 196 meetings in 2 days, right? And they were like super happy, right? That was you know, very kind of extreme case, but they worked it like really well. So that was one.
You get out what you put in.
Exactly.
Especially with conferences, you get out what you put in. You know, if you hustle, if you do your homework, you line up meetings in advance, then you go home with results. Otherwise, if you just like float around like a leaf, then you'll not get anything.
100%. And then what we were seeing then, and also was that a lot of the way that we were generating leads, like people are not walking past booths and scanning leads, scanning your lanyards, right? That doesn't happen virtually. You have to go to the booth. You have to then enter, and then you have to leave your details. And so you have to be quite, I guess, deliberate about doing that and wanting to do that and wanting to give your details to somebody. And we saw that behavior, you know, didn't necessarily sort of translate as well online. But what we're sort of able to do is that obviously people like opt in from a GDPR perspective to, you know, receive communications from partners, and they consent yes or no. And what we get from Hopin is data, more data than we would get in person, in that, you know, who attended the workshop that you were running, Mr. Partner, who visited your talk, you know, who swung by your booth, you know, who kind of interacted kind of here and there. And then each day we're able to kind of pull that data to the point where, you know, on average, we're probably generating around about sort of 300 or so MQLs, you know, for our gold and above partners, of which, you know, they were paying a lot less for, or 50% less for, than the same amount of leads that they would be getting.
Without the travel budget, you know, so like probably even way less, right?
Exactly. So those partners that invested in that then started to see, well, actually, we're getting leads at a lower cost than our in-person events. I want to put a bit of a caveat in there. Obviously, we do charge. You have to pay to attend a SaaStock conference, and the quality is good. But when you go online, the quality, the bar's been lowered a little bit. So the MQL quality from an online conference is not as high as the MQL quality at a SaaStock in Dublin conference, because the people who come to Dublin, they paid £1,000, plus they're going to be out of the office, you know, £1,000 for the ticket, out of the office for a week, 3,000 probably for their costs for the week or whatever it is, you know, and they, you know, maybe they've got more intent, or maybe they're more established as a company. And here we're getting a lot of earlier stage, you know, people that perhaps couldn't come to Dublin and, you know, afford that time out of the office at the cost, that can now pay $59, you know, to come to a SaaStock event. But we're still generating a lot of leads, and, you know, our partners like it, and the contracts are growing. And yes, I'm pretty pleased with the success that we found in the first year of doing that.
Very cool. One thought, I don't know if you're doing this already. The exhibitors, if you give them a way that they can give out like, I don't know, freebies or deals or something like this, so people can kind of collect those. This maybe also would be an interesting way to get opt-ins into what you're doing, kind of like the virtual swag idea, or like virtual, like kind of like only conference only deal. Like if you sign up now, you get blah,
We had something similar, not at all events, but certainly recollect that like SaaStock APAC, for instance, our partners had these kind of offers, and whether it was like, $100 Uber voucher, at one booth, and if you visit and leave your email, they'll give that voucher,
or like 20% off for the service for a year, or like whatever, kind of like something.
We've got another one like with G2, so they're partnering with us for SaaStock Remote, and I think for everybody that kind of leaves their email with G2, they're going to donate $25 to a charity of our kind of joint choosing, which is quite nice. So I'd do that.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you very much for walking us through this. Any other resources or things you want to recommend to the audience for anybody who wants to start their online conference?
I have to say, whilst we've pretty much kind of learned by doing, and we figured out our way, and one of the things that we did after each event was we did a retro, and effectively we, with the whole team, do the round robin, what worked, what didn't work. And after we did so many events that, the lists got smaller towards the end of the year, right? So we started to put, let's say perfect and improve keep improving our NPS, throughout the event. So that's kind of one thing that we did that really sort of helped us, and so not repeating mistakes. But additionally, maybe as a resource, I joined this WhatsApp group, which is called Virtual Event Pioneers, and I joined it by introduction. And basically, you had all these, conference organizers. I think majority of them are in Europe and the UK that had probably never spoken to each other before. But in a time of crisis, there was a WhatsApp group where kind of everybody came and was figuring out, what do we do? What platforms do we use? What pricing? And sharing best practices, right? Community, and that was great. So that was really, really kind of helpful for us.
I think that's a super cool thing with UpCoach. One of our businesses, we started doing like a town hall. I got this from Clubhouse. They do these open town halls where customers can join, and then they share kind of what's new, what we've built, but then also engaging with the customers. And so I think this was something that Hopin should do. Would be nice if they do, to kind of build this peer group where people can help each other and exchange. It's like similar to like the masterminds, like SaaStock Remote, SaaS Society, where you just come together and you just share what works and what doesn't work.
Good idea. I mean, they've got next week, Hopin are doing their first ever kind of user conference, right? Which we'll be attending. But in terms of maybe, connecting customers and having these kind of peer groups, that would be quite useful. And obviously, I think, it's something that we know the value of. Let's say that's what you're doing with UpCoach, and it's what we do, with SaaStock and our membership program as well. So yeah, definitely see the value. But for me, it's funny, having 5 years now, I guess, kind of run SaaStock, where, I'm helping startup founders, connect with each other and network and learn from each other, and, help facilitating this kind of peer learning. I didn't really have any peer learning for 3 or 4 years until perhaps maybe 2020. Now I see the value of it for myself.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Alex, thank you very much for coming on and sharing. How can people find you? And, before we forget, SaaStock Remote is coming up. It's on February 23rd.
Yeah, it's February 23rd to the 25th is when we're running the content for SaaStock Remote. So it's a virtual online conference, SaaS founders across the globe. It's on the 23rd, we're running sort of deep dive workshops. And then 24th, we're doing kind of like case study type content. And then 25th, real tactical kind of keynotes to help you, win and grow and scale your SaaS business in 2021. Then we're following week, we're doing the 3rd and the 4th, 2 networking days where you can come in and use tools like Conversation Starter and hop in to meet with the delegates and do your business lead generation or deal flow, for the year, that one event. So that's coming up. Anybody that's listening to the podcast that wants to attend, you can use code HWS20 to get a 20% discount on tickets, which are reasonably priced at $59 currently, although there's a price increase coming this week. And yeah, find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, probably best at Alex Theuma. That's THEUMA. LinkedIn, I think similar. And yeah, or go to SaaStock.com to kind of find out more.
Awesome. Rock and roll. Again, Alex, thank you for joining and sharing all this cool information. And I see you at SaaStock Remote.
Definitely. Thanks, David. See you there. Thank you, man.
Is your sales team spending too much time researching leads and accounts? We take over all the labor-intensive sales development tasks so your team can focus on building relationships and closing more deals. sales. We don't just build lists. We take a strategic, research-based approach to find your team qualified leads every day. Ready to start? Schedule your free consultation at taskdrive.com. That's taskdrive.com.
Thanks for listening to the How We Solve podcast. Dominate your market and crush the competition with our step-by-step playbooks. Subscribe right now in your favorite podcast player or visit howwesolve.com.